What is the creepiest sound audio recording you have ever heard on the internet or in real life? Story 1. That recording of that guy that used to kidnap women and keep them for a time in his dungeon. Don't remember his name. He used to do it with his wife. The recording was of what he used to play for his victims when they first arrived. Addendum. His name is David Parker Ray. Story 2. My granddad used to be in a ghost hunting group back in the 70s. He's a bit embarrassed now and blames it on being high. They never saw anything interesting. There's a lot of funny stories that came out of it. However, there's one legit thing that happened to them. They used to have a system where they'd pair up so that if anyone saw anything, they had another witness to verify it. On this occasion, they were investigating a haunted shop. There were 4 areas: the ground, shop floor, 2 large rooms on the first floor, and 1 big room on the second floor. Because there were only 6 of them, that meant they could only cover 3 areas. So 2 were stationed on the shop floor, 2 in one of the first floor rooms, and 2 on the top floor. In the other first floor room that they couldn't cover, they set up their tape recorder. They also all had thermometers. At approx 1:30 in the morning, everyone experienced a drop in temperature. It lasted for 5-10 minutes. Nothing else happened, and the next day when they checked their recording from the empty room, they went to the timestamp of the temperature drop first. At the very end of that time period, there is audibly a woman's voice saying, "Who's there?" They sent it for analysis, and apparently it was extremely rare for that model of recorder to pick up stray transmissions and so on. I've heard that recording, and it is shoot scary. Granddad is in the process of trying to get it digitized. If he does soon, I will post it. Answer: I'm rational and scientific, but superstitious shoot freaks me out. It's one of those, just in case I'm wrong, I'm not going to go looking for ghosts in this abandoned building thing. My only explanation for why ghosts might exist comes from the book Infinite Jest, where a, spoiler, dead character is a wraith, and wraiths experience normal life, but it's much, much faster. So to interact with the normal world, they have to stand perfectly still for days before someone can see them. My completely hand-wavy, not supported by anything theory is that ghosts are just entities on a different plane of existence. We don't know they exist, but they know we exist, and the methods of communication are very difficult, which, when perceived by us, comes across as antagonistic. Still, though, not fudge that stuff. Story 3. Honestly, all these recordings are creepy, but it will be a long time before an audio clip brings me the primal fear I felt when hearing a growl at 2 in the morning. No dogs, no windows open, no really obvious signs of anything dog-like near the wall I heard it from, but that shoot nearly made me cry out of fear. I can only describe it as like human imitating an angry dog, but deeper, and with a deeper growl as the undertone, I guess. It's actually one of the experiences I've had that I really hope there's an easy explanation for what I heard, instead of knowing that it could be something unexplained. Gex. Story 4. My mom took me to Costa Rica as a graduation present. We were woken up by howler monkeys in the middle of the night towards the end of our stay. Hands down the scariest sound I've ever heard, especially when I had no idea where it was coming from. Answer: sadly, there's no audio recording of it, but one day I was awoken by the sound of what appeared to be a bear growling menacingly very close to my window. I stayed completely still and waited to see if it was actually a bear or I was hallucinating. Heard it again, and it sounded even angrier this time. Then the 3rd time it growled, I realized what it was: my neighbor dragging something large and metallic across the asphalt. I thanked the Lord, since the only weapon I had at the time was a spoon, and I was seriously considering sacrificing my grandma to the bear. Sleepy me is a little meanie. Story 5. Got this from a similar thread. It's audio recordings from black boxes on planes that crashed. You can hear the fear in their voices, and sometimes you can tell they know they're about to die. Creepy AF. Story 6. The video where the guy gets his head cut off by the Mexican cartel. The noise from his breathing and blood is the most horrifying thing I have ever heard in my entire life. Edit. Here is the link. Sorry in advance. Story 7. The video of Kyle Dinkheller's takedown is beyond chilling. His screams of pain and pleas to the gunman are very difficult to listen to, and then the sudden silence after he is eliminated is even worse. Here is the link. Story 8. It was probably a schizophrenia simulation. The voices would come at you and tell you to do bad things. There is scary, and then there is disturbing. That kept me up that night. Link. Some people might not find it that disturbing, but I certainly did. Story 9. The passing of Vladimir Komarov as Soyuz 1 plummeted to Earth. Komarov knew the spacecraft was a death trap. The Soviet leaders insisted that it be rushed into production in time for the 50th anniversary of the USSR's founding. But he accepted the mission so his friend Yuri Gagarin wouldn't have to go in his place. Story 10. This is pretty fudge menacing, especially with the background piano playing as if we've stepped into the Twilight Zone. NSFL takedown. The last 911 call of Ms. Ruth Price. Honestly, the most unsettling audio I've ever heard. Story 11. Not the creepiest thing that exists, and definitely less creepy than the other posts, but it's the creepiest thing I have subjected myself to because I keep reading descriptions before pressing play. I used to listen to the radio with headphones as I went to sleep as a kid. Classic rock station. Every once in a while, the Clear Channel overlords dictated that a specific song should play just as I was going to sleep. Every goddamn time it came on, I would wake up and panic until I recognized it. Story 12. Two missionaries met a guy and gone to his cabin, found out that he is totally nuts and probably a child molester who tried to lure them into the woods afterward. Vocaroo and SoundCloud links are at the bottom of the comment. Answer. We had two 16-ish looking girls come by our house lately who wanted to come in and pray with us. They were from the Church of Jesus Christ and were going door to door. Now, I have no idea if they got into any of our neighbors' houses, but it took a lot of convincing to keep them out. One of them was in a really old-fashioned dress with her hair braided, looked like a young Carrie White, just innocent looking. They just seemed so niaive. They were insisting to come in with huge, proud smiles on their faces, and all I could think was, if we were creeps, what would keep us from kidnapping you the second you stepped in? Story 13. Pretty famous story, the Station Club fire. This video is incredibly disturbing. The crowd's reaction, the pile-up at the door, the man running out of the door while on fire. Anyways, later the cameraman is behind the brick building where there are no windows. The noise has calmed somewhat at this point, but you can hear people inside screaming for help. But there is nothing that can be done to help them at this point. The screams are haunting. Story 14. The Jonestown Massacre recording. For those who don't know, back in the day when there was the Jones cult tragic end in Guyana, they ran a recording of the entire thing, from Jones first telling them that if they can't live in peace, they should die in peace, to one or two people protesting but being shouted down, to it getting eerie and silent as Jones consoles mothers to not cry as their children die. Story 15. The sound of our neighbor when she found her husband and father of 3 kids had taken his life in the morning. A completely quiet street with just a long cry of "No!" Then nothing. I woke up from that. I can never forget this. Story 16. This 911 call creeped me out when I was a teenager, made me feel really paranoid for a good few weeks, as I was really scared of break-ins. I believe it was used for training due to the operator cutting the woman off as she was trying to give her address, and she never got to. I don't want to listen to it again to find out, but I think that's what happened. An elderly woman feels panicked due to an unknown person being in her front yard. The man eventually breaks into her house and takes down her while she's on the phone. I think it's the one where you can hear her saying, "Please help me," to breath after she was attacked. Horrible stuff. Story 17. This isn't from real life, but I think it counts. In Half-Life 2, the zombies are caused by parasitic creatures called head crabs latching onto their victims' heads and boring into their skull to take control of their brain. These zombies have very distinctive screams and moans, with a dark secret behind them. They are actual human screams and words in reverse. This indicates that the host is actually aware of its actions and in terrible pain. In the first expansion, zombified enemy troops are added, with their voice modulation intact. Their voice clips are actually various descriptions and commands issues during their last moments. Video demonstrating this. I always thought this was a clever and chilling way of making zombies terrifying again, before Garry's mod makes them stupid and hilarious once more. Story 18. The Fort Zancudo UFO sounds from GTA 5. It even distorts the TV screen, and if you get too close, it makes this loud screaming noise that acts like an EMP, disabling your helicopter. I just grabbed a video of it that showed both noises clearly. Story 19. Love Roller Coaster by the Ohio Players. A bit of a creepy conspiracy theory behind. Part way through the song in an instrumental, you can hear a scream in the background. I can't remember what it's meant to be, but I think it was someone getting takedown. A quick Google could sort that, but I'm on my phone and lazy. Story 20. People begging for their lives either before they're shot or begging afterwards. I heard that during the war against Azerbaijan, either it's the wounded or it was some ethnic Azeri or Turk who ran out of luck. The scream of Grad rockets is either comforting or horrifying to hear them screaming. Story 21. The Lost Cosmonauts recordings made by the Giudica Cordiglia brothers in the early 60s. This one is supposedly of an unknown female Russian cosmonaut as she makes a doomed attempt at re-entry. The recording is almost certainly fake. It's worth noting here that the brothers had a Russian-speaking sister who may have provided the voice, but even so, it's pretty creepy. Story 22. What schizophrenia sounds like. So this is the creepiest thing I've probably heard. Not as horrifying as some of the previous posts, but I find this really hard to sit and listen to all the way through. It's so creepy. Edit. Listen with headphones. It doesn't have the same effect coming from speakers. Story 23. A girl sobbing to her mother and screaming in agony as she was being slowly eaten by a bear after having watched her father die the same way. I'm sorry I clicked on that. I used to think I wanted to hear the audio of Timothy Treadwell, subject of Werner Herzog film Grizzly Man, being eaten, but not anymore. But I have had my fill. Story 24. Tornado air raid sirens, but they have to be those big old yellow Federal Thunderbolt sirens that were put up during the 50s and 60s. I grew up during the tail end of the Cold War, and I remember the occasional made-for-TV movies about nuclear war, which seemed to be somewhat popular in the 80s and scared the shoot out of me as a kid. Then in high school, my journalism class was right underneath the Thunderbolt on the roof of the school, and they test it the first Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m., right after my journalism class had started. Those fuckers are insanely loud when you're only 5 feet away from one. I have a weird fascination with them, though. The sound creeps me out, but I also like it for some strange reason. I've also got a morbid curiosity and interest in nuclear war. Alas, the newer sirens that they've been replacing the old Thunderbolts with don't sound nearly as menacing, and are actually kind of disappointing to hear. However, hearing that loud pre-recorded voice come over them and echo throughout the city is creepy in a cool way. Edit. Not my video, but here's a good example with the siren in attack mode. 153. That dissonant sound and echo in... The background always gives me the creeps, but for some reason I still love it. Story 25. Probably not the creepiest, but I always like to put on Hamburger Lady by Throbbing Gristle in the car late at night when I am DD. I always try and see how long it takes before someone asks what we are listening to. Story 26. I used to have a black cat who must have had throat cancer or some kind of condition with his throat or vocal cords because he could never form a proper meow. When he'd try to meow, he'd make this very scratchy, throaty, rah-rah sound. It was pretty creepy to begin with. It's even more creepy when you hear it in the night, in the dark, half asleep. Story 27. Hard to explain, but the gas detection alarm at the project I'm working on, it's high-pitched and has a second tone under neither it that makes it sound like it's oscillating, and it's the most alien-sounding noise you'll ever hear, like some sort of creature screeching at you. Haven't heard a siren like it before. It's then followed by a calm female voice saying, "Emergency! Evacuate now! Emergency, Then the tone comes back on again. It's just an overall creepy, scary thing to hear, because the whole site goes quiet and creates a weird atmosphere when everyone thinks they're about to die from either asphyxiation or an explosion. Story 28. How has nobody mentioned the bloop yet? By far and away the most unsettling thing I've heard on the internet. Arlia awaits. Edit. It's been confirmed it was nothing more than an iceberg. Seems like I've lost those 5 years I spent living in fear of Cthulhu. Story 29. Don't have a link, but the recording of the execution chamber of the guy who was about to be executed. There was a creepy, unknown voice in the background saying all sorts of stuff to the guy that was about to be executed. It was on Reddit that I first heard it. Story 30. The Max Headroom WTTW incident. This guy hijacked the WTTTW, publicly funded television in Chicago, plays Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Downton Abbey, Doctor Who, and stuff like that, and said all of these creepy things. He was never caught. Story 31. The interrogation of Kipling Kinkle. Can't link because I'm on mobile, but a simple Google search will bring it up. He may have been a mass murderer, but from the recording he's just a scared little boy. Story 32. These aren't so creepy as generally unsettling. 2010 Polish Air Force crash which eliminate many high-ranking Polish officials. Japan Air 123, 1985. This is heavily abridged. The original recording is 32 minutes or so, and parts of this are missing and only heard from one side. Backmasking in Pink Floyd's Empty Spaces. Backmasking in ELO's Fire on High. Story 33. The sound of people burning to passing in a music venue because so many people are trying to get out at the same time that they all get stuck in the door and in the building. Most horrifying thing I've ever seen or heard. I can't remember the name of the video, but it was on Reddit about a year ago, so if someone wants to post a link to the video, that'd be cool. Story 34. I was on the phone with my boyfriend the other night, and I asked him a question about something, and all of a sudden it started getting all static-eye. I thought he was just trying to screw with me by making it sound that way, and the whispering into the mouthpiece like he was telling me a secret or something. It was really weird sounding. Then he ended up hanging up on me and calling me back. He then asked me if I had heard the weird static with the whispering coming through too. We both ended up sleeping with the lights on that night. Story 35. I can't find it right now, but the audio of the police call when Lynn Balfour discovered that she had accidentally left her baby in the car when she went to work, and he died from the heat. A woman is describing what is happening, and you can hear the mom in the background just screaming, "No, no, oh God, please no," in a very painful way. Story 36. V is for Vrillion. Still chilling to listen even today. TV hijack in 1977, which supposedly came from aliens. The aliens spoke English, yet no one could trace where it was coming from or how. Even though it's most likely fake, it chills me to even think about it. Story 37. Probably gonna get buried, but I've seen similar threads, and there is one video that always pops into my mind, but I forget to post. This was taken during a graduation party at a restaurant in Parkersburg, IA, back in May of 2008. An EF5 tornado entirely wiped away the south side of Parkersburg, eliminate 9 people while this video was recorded from inside a walk-in cooler. You can't see anything when the tornado hits, but oh my God, the sounds captured are bone-chilling. This is what it sounds like to get hit by an EF5. The sound of the debris hitting the cooler and the screaming families. Thinking this is their final moments disturbs more than any other audio clip I've listened to. The sound of humans screaming for their lives as the building comes apart gets to me. You can just feel the raw terror. I've only watched it a handful of times and don't plan on doing so anytime soon. Apparently, the foundation and the walk-in cooler was all that was left of this restaurant when it was over. Everyone inside lived somehow. Story 38. It was from a video of what was supposedly evidence from when some Russian scientists dug a hole deep into the earth. They claimed it was a hole dug so deep that they could hear screaming voices coming from hell. The sound on that video creeped me out. Story 39. I was watching a meteor shower in a parking lot near a river once and heard a deep, guttural growl in the grass and trees nearby in the pitch dark. Not a dog or a wolf. Sounded like a mountain lion or a jaguar or something. Noped the fudge out and watched the rest of the meteor shower through my windshield. Fudge terrifying. Story 40. This, an audio of an old man shooting, and eliminate 2 teenagers that broke into his house. You can actually hear the sounds of them dying and the satisfaction that he receives from it. Fudge up stuff. Story 41. I know I'm late and no one will ever see this, but this one. No gore, no passing, and no real harm done to anything living, just utter fear. Pure I don't want to die fear from a grown man. Chills me to the bone. Story 42. Holy fudge, I've seen and read a lot of terrible things on the internet, but I've never stumbled across this transcript before. What a horrifying person. I dislike to even call him a person. I can't even imagine hearing it or being one of his victims. I've never been violent with anyone in my life, but that is a specific person I would actually enjoy torturing or take down, and that makes me feel really weird and uneasy about myself. Story 43. That sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. Here in OKC, the tornado sirens just give one long, continuous, annoying, deafening wail. There's a siren right near my apartment building. It drives me crazy every Saturday when they test them. Story 44. Something similar in Scotland at the Carstairs Mental Hospital. They have sirens to warn if somebody has escaped. They test the sirens every week and are scary as shoot. When it goes off, you hope they are just testing them. Story 45. I'm rational and scientific, but superstitious shoot freaks me out. It's one of those, just in case I'm wrong, I'm not going to go looking for ghosts in this abandoned building thing. My only explanation for why ghosts might exist comes from the book Infinite Jest, where a, spoiler, dead character is a wraith, and wraiths experience normal life, but it's much, much faster. So to interact with the normal world, they have to stand perfectly still for days before someone can see them. My completely hand-wavy, not supported by anything, theory is that ghosts are just entities on a different plane of existence. We don't know they exist, but they know we exist, and the methods of communication are very difficult, which, when perceived by us, comes across as antagonistic. Still, though, not fudge that stuff. Story 46. There was one that CNN aired a while back of a guy driving with his family. The accelerator was stuck and they were going 120 miles. They called 911 for help, and you could hear them crying how they are going to die and begging for God to help them. Of course, CNN played it all the way up until you hear them crash and die. They were screaming the entire time. It was fudge terrible, and if I remember correctly, people called into CNN complaining how horrific it was to listen to. I'll never forget it. And they never played it again. Someone should have been fired. Story 47. The Columbine 911 call from the librarian is pretty chilling. She's screaming and panicking for most of the video. Towards the end, she says something like, "They are in the library, they are shooting everyone," in a quiet, flat voice. Story 48. This video holds the one spot for worst things seen on the internet, and I didn't even watch more than a few seconds of it. I just know it's terrible. It's a lot worse than any decapitation, torture, war footage, tragic end that I've ever seen. And that is because these people were not asking for trouble. They weren't in a war zone or had been stealing money from a crazy warlord. It's just a normal family traveling by car, not doing anything crazy, in a calm place. And it sends shock into me, as this could actually happen without being in a crazy and dangerous situation, other than being in a car, which my family and every family often are. It could, albeit not very likely, happen to my family. Story 49. As somebody who had to go and search for a bunch of baby rabbits that escaped, I can vouch for this one. I was looking all over the yard, and as I walked around, I stepped on this plyboard. Holy God darn hell, I shat twice. I lifted it up, and there they were. They were all fine. They just screamed when I stepped on the board. Story 50. Never heard rabbits scream before until I watched the PETA video of Chinese workers ripping their fur out so they could turn it into fabrics. I don't usually pay much attention to animal cruelty, but watching those rabbits scream was a little much for me. Story 51. When I was growing up, we had outside cats. One day, me and my dad were gathering limbs to burn in a pile, and I threw a large one on, and a baby rabbit ran out of the wood pile. We were both happy that it got away before we set it on fire. However, a few minutes later, I heard that thing scream, and I knew that one of our cats got it. I found it with a hole in its chest. Story 52. Went fox hunting with my brother-in-law when I was younger. We went at night, and he brought a mini boombox with an audio tape of a hurt rabbit screaming in order to lure the foxes. There is nothing more terrifying than being out in the woods after dark and hearing that playing on a loop. Story 53. A likely explanation is sort of a light version of sleep paralysis, sort of in between being awake and asleep. Or if you live in a suburb or a foresty area, I know I sometimes get mice or squirrels or whatever climbing around my windows or once even in the wall, and they make a pretty creepy sound, much like what you described. Or demon dog possession, IDK man. Story 54. This sounds like something that could be figured out. What were you doing at the time? Were you out back having a smoke or in your bedroom asleep? What area do you live in, without being too specific? No personal info and whatnot. Are you out in the woods or downtown? What animal growls have you heard that you can verify to narrow down the list? Is your building old? As in, could an animal have gotten into the wall from outside? Story 55. Is the one you're referring to the one where the deputy pulls over an older white Datsun or Chevy, and then the guy proceeds to shoot the officer like 8 or 9 times? If so, that video ruined my life for 2 weeks as I saw it, 2 days after my best friend of 20 years graduated school and became a highway patrolman. Edit. Forgot a word. Story 56. I used to play around a good bit with shortwave radios back in the day and stumbled across my fair share of these. India Charlie Sierra 2. India Charlie Sierra 2. To be honest, I much preferred the pirate radio stations you could also hear a fair bit at the time. Story 57. UVB 76 is pretty darn creepy. Active since the Cold War. Is actually an open microphone, not a loop. So there's some room, somewhere with a radio open as well as a microphone open. We often hear numbers codes being transmitted from there. Someone found the location, but it's from a destroyed building near Pripyat, in the middle of the forest. Story 58. That was a weird story. If you like the whole Jim Jones thing, there was a movie released this year called The Sacrament that follows that entire story. It was filmed in my hometown, and I was an extra in it. If you're into the weird kind of thing, it might be worth a watch to you. Story 59. Sadly, there's no audio recording of it, but one day I was awoken by the sound of what appeared to be a bear growling menacingly very close to my window. I stayed completely still and waited to see if it was actually a bear or I was hallucinating. Heard it again, and it sounded even angrier this time. Then, the third time it growled, I realized what it was, my neighbor dragging something large and metallic across the asphalt. I thanked the Lord since the only weapon I had at the time was a spoon, and I was seriously considering sacrificing my grandma to the bear. Sleepy me is a little meanie. Story 60. For some strange reason, I love that sound. Anytime I am near one that's being tested, I just stand there and listen. Edit. I just listen through your 10-minute video of a siren. What is wrong with me? Story 61. FYI, since it seems you're not from the USA, these alarms are frequently heard during the summer months in the Midwest. We use them as tornado sirens. On a particularly bad day, they can be heard 5 to 20 times in a day. Very freaky. Example, not mine. Story 62. We had 2 16-ish looking girls come by our house lately who wanted to come in and pray with us. They were from the Church of Jesus Christ and were going door to door. Now I have no idea if they got into any of our neighbors' houses, but it took a lot of convincing to keep them out. One of them was in a really old-fashioned dress with her hair braided, looked like a young Carrie White, just innocent looking. They just seemed so niave. They were insisting to come in with huge proud smiles on their faces, and all I could think was, if we were creeps, what would keep us from kidnapping you the second? You stepped in. Story 63. Whoa, wait, I remember this thread and I listened to this before, but now I can't tell if I'm going crazy, because this time I listened to it, I heard something similar to the strange noises from around the world. From the other comments in this post, in the recording around 3530 in the SoundCloud. Can anyone else confirm that they heard that? Or am I imagining things?